Hey guys, what is going on? It is Brooke, or the Undead DM, back at it again with another video for Homebrew review. And in this episode, I'm going to be covering over the second subclass for the Shaman by Ross Leiser, known as Sympathicism. Now, if you haven't seen the previous video of the spirits or the core class, I'll link them down in the description first. I'd recommend you go watch that first before continuing, just to get a general idea of what the class is about and how I'm going to be judging the power of this class. But without further ado, let's get started. So, with sympathicism, it's what you would think of as a voodoo doctor or a voodoo person. They use effigies, dolls, puppets, things like that. And at level 2, when you take this subclass, you get proficiency with 2 of either leather's workers' tools, weaver's tools, or woodcarver's tools. You also gain expertise whenever using any of them, so instead of using just your proficiency, you double your proficiency when making checks with those tools. And with 1 hour of light activity, which, for those who don't know, is anything that isn't involving combat, so you could do this within 2 hours of a long rest. You could do this over the course of 2 hours of long rest or during a short rest, because a short rest is 1 hour of light activity. And 1 gold piece worth of materials and the tool that you have proficiency in, you can make a poopit. Not a puppet, a poopit. Okay? A little bit of a typing error, but that's fine. It's a tiny object, and it looks like however you want, and it's considered a spellcasting focus. Okay? That's it. At second level, you also get Spirit Bond. So, you can create a bond between the spirits and yourself or with another creature. So, as an action on your turn, while you're holding your puppet, you can bond a spirit guide you are channeling to a creature you can see within 60 feet. So if you haven't seen the previous video, you can channel 1 spirit every day until you reach 17th level or 18th level where you can channel 2. So you hold your doll and you channel 1 spirit during a long rest. And you could target 1 creature within 60 feet of you, and for 1 minute they are bonded to the puppet. And the bond breaks if you break concentration, so can't cast concentration spells while using this, unfortunately. The bond also breaks if the puppet is destroyed, or if you use the bonus action to end the bond. Once you create a bond, you cannot do so again until you finish a long rest, or until you expend a first level spell or higher to use it again. You can only have 1 bond at a time, and you cannot create a new bond while you already have 1 active. And while the creature is bonded, you can choose it to either be a blessing or a curse. Obviously, your allies are going to get the blessings and your enemies are going to get the curse, but we're going to determine how good those are. So, blessing. At the start of each of the bonded creature's turns, it gains a d6 temporary hit points, and when the bonded creature makes an ability check, attack roll, or saving throw, it can choose to make the roll with advantage. It must choose to do so before it makes the roll. If the affected roll was a saving throw, the strength of the protective magic is consumed and the bond breaks. Otherwise, the bond remains intact, but the creature cannot use this ability again until the start of its next turn. When the bond breaks, the creature loses any remaining temporary hit points from the bond. So this is a bit confusing, because remember, it says the bond doesn't break unless you break concentration, the doll is destroyed, or until you use a bonus action to end it. But the blessing states that once they make a roll with advantage, the bond breaks. But if you look here, it says, but the creature cannot use this ability again until the start of its next turn. So what this is telling me is, based on this wording, is that on your turn, as an action, you hold your puppet, target your ally. Let's say your fighter. You target your fighter, and when it comes to his turn, he gets a d6 temporary hit points. Let's say he misses his attack and he knows he can hit it if he rolls with advantage. So he rolls with advantage, and now it says right here, that if the affected roll was a saving throw, okay, it was a saving throw, my bad. So, attack rolls and ability checks, you're fine. So, fighter does his stuff, he's fine. And, oh, another thing is that it has to be before you roll, so you can do that. But it's very interesting that it works on attack rolls and ability checks infinitely for that minute, but it only works on saving throws once. You would think that if it worked on saving throws just once, it would allow you to instantly succeed. It's a little bit strange that Fighter gets Indomitable, which is a feature he can already use. Or other people just have other things that can allow them to make saving throws at advantage, like the Barbarian's Danger Sense. But I guess this is good for spellcasters, I guess. So, if the roll was a saving throw, that means on the next turn, if the fighter somehow fails his saving throw, or before he rolls his saving throw, because remember, it has to be before you roll, you say, I'm going to roll this saving throw with advantage. And let's say you roll a 19 and an 18. So no matter what, he just succeeded the saving throw. So now the bond is broken. But he cannot use this until the start of its next turn. Meaning you're still technically bonded, because it says that it cannot use its saving throw ability until the start of its next turn. Meaning, by its own wording, it states that the bond is temporarily broken. Because he wouldn't be able to use this anyway on the start of his next turn unless you, as the shaman, wasted your action on your second turn to give it back to him. So, rules as written, this is basically stating that once you have him tethered for that minute, he is tethered for that entire minute unless you physically break the bond or something else like breaking concentration or the doll is destroyed. This is just a temporary break, meaning it's a small buff in between turns, but it is not a permanent buff. It's a bit strange that it works this way, but I guess the intention, is that it's supposed to be a one-time save until the start of its next turn, which I guess it's fine, but it would have been better if it just allowed them to succeed the save as is, like it just gave them advantage on attack rolls and ability checks as long as they are connected to it. And if they have to make a saving throw, they could choose to break the bond before the timer or besides any other conditions, and then just choose to succeed the save without using a reaction. I think that would have been better. But I guess that might be too strong. I don't know. I think it would have been just fine, but that's beside the point. It also loses any temporary hit points, which does kind of suck. I would have just left the temporary hit points alone. And the next one is you could choose a curse. So as a bonus action, you can cause the bonded creature to take a d6 necrotic or psychic damage, which is your choice when you create the bond. And when the bonded creature makes an ability check or an attack roll, you can use your reaction to force it to make the roll with disadvantage. And at the end of each of the target's turns, it must make a wisdom save against your spell save DC to break the bond. So, the blessing is definitely better than the curse, because all the curse does is say, hey you, yeah you over there, for 1 minute maximum. For 1 minute maximum, 1 turn minimum, because you apply this and if the creature goes after you, it's 1 turn. And it also states at the end of its turn, meaning it can't just make it at the beginning, which is fine. So you choose one guy, he takes a d6 necrotic or psychic damage, and you have to use your reaction to force them to make an attack roll or ability check at disadvantage. So basically, it's silvery barbs with a little bit of damage. But there's no save with silvery barbs. Personally, a bonus action, no. I don't think if the blessing is just an innate thing, that the curse should be something that you have to activate. Because if the blessing was a bonus action to give the temporary hit points, it would also be terrible. A d6 temporary hit points still isn't good, but it's better than nothing. So I would change curse to, you know, at the start of the creature's turn, it takes a d6 psychic or necrotic damage. And for the entire duration, it has to make ability checks and attack rolls at disadvantage. Because here, if you look at Blessing, it says, when the bonded creature makes an ability check, attack roll, or saving throw, it can make the roll with advantage. But you have to do it beforehand. That just applies to everything. So a fighter making 8 attacks in a turn can just make 16 d20 rolls because he can. But meanwhile, this one, you have to use your one reaction to force it to make one ability check or one attack roll at disadvantage. Why is the curse worse? Makes no sense. It doesn't, it's just not good. Bond of Empathy at 6th level, though. So, you always have the Warding Bond spell prepared. And it is a ritual spell. It doesn't count against the number of ritual spells you can prepare. And when you cast the spell, you ignore its material components, and the spell lasts until dispelled. Now, I'm not very familiar with the spell warding bond, but if I'm not mistaken, it's a pretty okay spell, I believe. So, yeah, it's an action touch, duration 1 hour. They gain. You target one creature, they get a +1 bonus to AC, and saving throws, resistance to all damage, and each time it takes damage, you take the same amount. And the spell drops if you drop to 0 hit points, or if the target becomes separated by more than 60 feet. It also ends with the spell's cast again on either of the connect creatures, and you can also dismiss it as an action. So, since it lasts until dispelled, that means you could just give one person +1 bonus to AC and saving throws, which is nice, I guess. I would prefer more of a power buff at this level rather than a support spell. But considering how its blessing from Spirit Bond at 2nd level is decent, this kind of makes sense to kind of carry it on. I don't think it's a good ability, but hey, it's a free spell. It's a pretty okay spell, but the fact that you have to wait till 6th level to get this 2nd level spell is a bit sad. Would prefer like a 3rd level spell because it is a full caster, but whatever. Guiding Bond. So, when you have a Spirit Bond established, and you cast a spell with any range other than self that is granted by a spirit guide you are channeling. So, you have to have a Spirit Bond by using your action. You have to cast a spell that doesn't have the range of self, and it has to be from a spirit guide you are channeling. You can target the bonded creature across any distance so long as the target is on the same plane as you. You ignore the spell's range, and being able to see the puppet counts as being able to see the target and the target's space for the purposes of the spell. If the spell normally targets more than one creature or affects an area, it instead targets or affects only the bonded creature. So, here's what's interesting about this. It says you cannot have it have a range that is self. So you can't cast Mage Armor on yourself and have an ally bonded to you and then cast Mage Armor on them as well. But if you have the Benevolent Spirit from my Spirit video, you could cast Cure Wounds on yourself, and because it is a spell that you are casting granted by a Spirit Guide and it doesn't have the range of self, it has the range of touch, you can heal your ally with it too. This is similar to the um, trying to think the druid. I forget which subclass off the top of my head, but I think it's the wildfire who can also do this, where they gain a certain amount of healing if you heal yourself with a spell, which is alright, I guess. But what this is very interesting is here, where it states you ignore the spell's range and you could target the creature from any distance. But the strange thing is that the bond doesn't have a range of infinite. Remember, the bond still has a range of 60 feet, and then it breaks if they go past 60 feet. So saying that this can target at any distance is kind of irrelevant, because you can't make the bond larger than 60 feet. This just means that a spell with normally the range of touch now has a range of basically anywhere from 10 to 60 feet. Which is interesting, but what's even more interesting is that this bypasses all invisibility. It's basically an auto hit no matter what, because you don't have to see the target. It goes around corners because it says here you ignore the spell's range and being able to see the puppet counts as being able to see the target. So basically half cover doesn't work, which is very interesting. I think that's how half cover and 3/4 cover works, is that because you are behind an object, you have a bonus to AC. But I think in terms of the rulings, it states that the reason you get this bonus is because it's harder to hit you from around a corner. But since you ignored its range, and I don't know, it might ignore 3/4 cover, it might not. Go ahead and people who know that rule a little bit more than I do, go ahead and leave me a comment and tell me if I'm correct on that. But this is very interesting because of the last portion. If the spell normally targets more than one creature or affects an area, it instead targets or affects only the bonded creature. Which is very nice because if you bond it to an enemy within melee range of a fighter or a barbarian or anybody like that, you can cast Fireball on that enemy, and they are the only ones that will take that 8d6 damage. It's very nice to protect your allies, but it also means that spells like Scorching Ray that normally have multiple attacks and can hit that target also only affect him because of how the name is, the ability is worded. So, area of effect spells, this is very interesting. It's a little late, honestly. And also, I would have increased the range of the puppet instead of just saying it can hit from any distance, even though the distance is still only 60 feet. Unless this is an intended, the range is increased to infinity, which is kind of funny because that means you can essentially target like some snot-nosed king from halfway across the world and then just look at the puppet and then cast Fireball and just incinerate him, which is kind of funny. But if this is just as a, you can just target them with any spell that doesn't have the range of self, then you just make every single touch spell a range of 60 feet max. Like, you just give it a range of 60 feet. Because that's as far as the puppet's allowed to go before it breaks. So I don't get it. And finally, Master Sympath. At 14th level, the d6 for your blessings, temporary hit points, and the curse's damage becomes a d12. Okay. So basically, you get an average of a 3-point healing or damage boost. And you can have up to 2 bonds active at a time, given that each one uses a different puppet. One bond is a blessing and the other one a curse. You can create 2 bonds with the same action, but you must expend a separate spell slot for each bond. And additionally, you always have the spells Bestow Blessing and Bestow Curse prepared as shaman rituals, and they don't count against the number of spells you prepare a day. Now, Master Sympath I think all of these abilities need to be shifted down. Like Spirit Bond and bonus proficiencies, that's fine. Keep them as level 2. But I think Bond of Empathy needs to be brought down to like level 2. Because Warding Bond being a second level spell, maybe even level 3. Because remember, you get third level spells at level 5. So you essentially get a free second level spell at 6th level when you already have access to third level spells. So it's a little bit strange that you get it at the same time you get a third level spell. It's a little strange. Also, Guiding Bond needs to be lower, and Master Sympath needs to be lower. And then just replace the 14th level ability with something. Because having to play the entire game only bonding yourself to one ally or one enemy at a time, and also wasting your action doing so for only a d6 temporary hit points or a d6 damage, and then at 14th level, which, by the way, a lot of games don't go past this level, because at that point, players start getting like the really strong abilities and the really good spells. Like they were already getting pretty good spells to begin with at 3rd level with slow, but now they're getting upwards of like 6th level spells and 7th level spells. So, not a lot of campaigns are going past this point. They're maybe going up to level 12 or 13. So, why do you have to wait all the way to that just to bond 2 creatures? And you can't even bond 2 allies. You have to bond an ally and an enemy. And it also, here's the weirdest thing. You have to expend a separate spell slot for each bond. But yet here in the Spirit Bond section, you don't have to. You just get to bond one person for free. And it says, alternatively, you can spend a first level spell slot to use it again. So this is basic. So Master Sympath is basically saying to you now that instead of getting one free one and then getting to spend a first level spell slot to attach it to an enemy for your second bond, you now don't get any free bonds, and you have to spend your spell slots on both of them. Because it says, but you must expend a separate spell slot for each bond. Each, including the first one. If this just said you have to expend a spell slot for the second bond, that would be fine. But since it says each bond, that means even if you take a long rest, you still have to expend a spell slot for that bond. You never get a free one after Master Sympath. You always have to expend your spell slots for it, which is awful. And also, Bestow Blessing and Bestow Curse at 14th level, when I think they're 3rd level spells, which is just sad. Let me double check on that right quick. Yeah, it's a 3rd level spell. So you're getting a 3rd level spell at 14th level, which I think is around the same time you get 6th level spells. It's just, why are you giving them lower level spells for this? Yeah, you get 7th level spell slots at 14th level. You get a 7th level spell slot at 14th level, and yet you're getting a 3rd level spell. I could live with getting a 2nd level spell at 6th, because at 6th you're only getting a 3rd. You got a 3rd level spell slot. Like, you got 2 3rd level spell slots the previous level at level 5, and you got an additional one at this level. So getting another 2nd level spell, it's not too far off. Still not quite happy about it, but it's fine for early game. But the fact that they went so far back to give you a spell that you should have gotten with Bond of Empathy makes no sense. None. But overall, I think it's not good. It's not good. It's very weak later on, extremely so. Extremely weak later on, and pretty weak in the early stages. But that blessing can help sometimes. But that 14th level ability just kills it, in my opinion. So, with with that, my final thoughts are that the proficiencies are fine. The spirit bond, just make them better. Make the just make the blessing and the curse better. The bond of empathy, just make that a lower level ability. Like lump it in with the other two at level 2. Because I'm not sure if you get. No, you don't. So put this at like a 3rd level. I know it wouldn't make much sense, but I mean, it's better than nothing. And then move Guiding Bond down to 6th level, move Master Sympath down to 10th level, and then just give them a brand new 4th level ability. Also, change the wording of the final sentence of this first paragraph of Master Sympath. And also, just give them Bestow Curse and Bestow Blessing at 6th level. Please. But with that, I'd like to thank you so much for watching. If you guys like this episode, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more. And I'll be back with the 3rd subclass called Totemism for the Shaman. So I'll see you guys in the next episode. Latest.